Hi everyone. I spent the worst night ever. I only got 3 hours of sleep, if that. Um, I had nightmares all night. Um, what's happened has really gotten to me. And I would like to apologize to everyone. I realized that when I argued against systemic racism, that some people heard in their heads there is no racism. And I realized that people thinking there is no racism just because I argued against systemic racism is nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the truth. Racism is all throughout our society. It's pervasive. It's everywhere. Um, everyone is that everyone that's white is racist to a greater or lesser degree. I can't account for African Americans or any other race because I don't know what it's like to be them or how they define racism or you know how they perceive race. I don't know, so I really can't judge or say, you know, like like my mom who's so concerned with reverse racism. I can't. And it happens so infrequently. Probably other races are better than white people when it comes to race, that they're maybe less racist. And just because they've had so many experiences with racism, that it's taught them not to discriminate or not to. Now that's not to say that there isn't racial hatred everywhere, because there is. But white people are the worst. Let's face it, white people are the worst when it comes to race, because the evidence is all around us. I mean, other races are segregated. They're segregated in their own communities. White people all live together in one group, and they don't move out to black communities or Mexican communities. They don't move out to Asian communities. They don't. They just stay right where they are with other white people, and that causes huge problems for other races. And white people aren't hiring, which is a huge problem for other races. And they aren't hiring. They aren't hiring. They're not living with them. Schools are run down. Schools are run down in black communities because white people aren't contributing their money to those communities for their schools. They're not sharing the wealth. They're not sharing any wealth at all. I mean, want to know how bad it really is? Okay, it's down to 400 people own most of the wealth in America. It's 1,000th of 1% of Americans. Not 1%, not a tenth of 1%, not 100th of 1%. It's 1,000th of 1%. So think about that. I have some books to recommend for you. Just check out the description. There's links below. I looked very, very hard for books on race and law, racism in the law, or laws that are racist. Do you know that I couldn't find any. I looked and I couldn't find any books. I'm sure there's books out there that have been written on the subject. I feel certain of this, that there doesn't need to be a book written on the subject that's already been written. So if you know of a book, if you've heard of a book on this subject, please leave it in the comments below. Leave a comment with the title of a book on racism and law, and racist laws, specifically racist laws, because I looked. Now there are books, okay? There were books about 8 states in the South that still have segregation laws on the books. And Virginia has segregation laws still on the books. But there was nothing on northern states. Nothing about the state where I live. Nothing about U.S. law. I couldn't find it. So if you know of a book, if you know of a good book on U.S. law or northern states and racist laws, please do share it in the comments below. Now I wanna recommend some other books to you. I have a list of books that are specifically designed to speak to white Americans about race and racism and the African American experience and so on. And so it's a book list. I can't attest to any of the books because I haven't read them. I can't say yay or nay to anything in the books or give any pros or cons. I just wanted to guide you toward it, and I strongly recommend that you read all the books you can. Read all the books you can get your hands on. A book was recommended to me today, or rather it was yesterday. I'm not sure if it was yesterday or today because it was somewhere around midnight. It's called Rabbit. It's an autobiography of Miss Pat. And I haven't read it, so I don't know if it's a good book or not. But you can read that book as well. And it talks about the black experience in America. And I've seen racism firsthand. I saw the consequences of all of it, of the buses not running from downtown Detroit out to the suburbs directly. The buses stop in Detroit, right at the border of Detroit, right at 8 Mile. Then you have to get off that bus, get on another bus, and pay more fare to get the rest of the way out to the suburbs. Why? Why isn't there one bus system for the whole city? And the suburbs have their bus system, and then the city has its bus system. The only reason for a law like that is to keep African Americans out and keep the white people in. There's no other reason for that. Another thing is that the white flight out to the suburbs. People didn't want to live together. They wanted to live separate from each other. And white people specifically didn't want to live around black people, so they moved out to the suburbs. And they're still moving farther out. Every single year they get a new house 20 miles further away. And when I was in foster care, there was a whole racist city, a whole town. Well, it was a small city that was racist. They were all racist. And there was a neighboring city nearby out in the country, where African Americans lived. It was all African American. And they hated everybody in that city. They hated everybody in the neighboring city. And they were really They were really serious racists. They were like, you know, I mean, they weren't dressed as a Ku Klux Klaner. They weren't specifically, but they were definitely white supremacists in that city. And the shame of it all is that the mother never said anything to her son. She never, and he was adopted. She never told him not to believe this. She never spoke to him and asked him not to believe this. She wasn't specifically racist herself, but she aided and abetted racism. So racism is very real. It's a very real problem, and it's not just overt racism. It's also staying silent on the subject of race and doing nothing. Staying silent and doing nothing. People are staying silent on the subject of race. They're polite. They're nice people. They're polite people. They go about their daily business. Anyone who talks about race, even if it's something they don't want to hear or don't like hearing, they immediately jump on them and jump down their throats, and they're like, shut up. Shut up. Like they do in that movie, you know, like Mean Girls. Remember Mean Girls? Shut up. And I'm just trying to talk through this and get some perspective myself. Look, when this happened with George Floyd, it's the most racist thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. And I've seen a lot of racist things. Okay, I've seen a lot of racism. I've seen a lot of racist things. It was the most racist thing I'd ever seen in my life before. And then when there were white boys coming into a neighborhood and burning a black neighborhood in 2020, that was the second most racist thing I had ever seen in my life. And I totally lost it. I lost my mind. I lost my mind. And I thought to myself, well, it's what they're teaching these kids. It's them teaching them, like a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, right? They're teaching them about systemic racism, and they see friends online who are opposed to capitalism, and they're all encouraging them to burn down a business. These friends of theirs are encouraging them to burn down a business. They're like, yeah, that's all right. I'll go burn down a business. So they go and they burn down a business, and it's a black-owned business. And then people have no food. They have no money. They have no jobs. And the business is gone, and it's an empty shell. And that is just so racist, and it's so wrong. And I thought to myself, if the idea of systemic racism is contributing to this, then the idea of systemic racism is a bad thing. But when it comes to the cultural aspect, because systemic racism means a lot of different things. One of them is law, one of them is society, one of them is culture. And the culture aspect of it, totally true. I don't know anything about the law. I'm not familiar with laws. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't write any laws. I don't work for the legislature. So I don't know anything about laws, but I do know about culture a lot. And there definitely is a pervasive culture of racism. And I'm hoping that what happened to George Floyd will change things, but I kind of doubt it, because people are really comfortable where they are right now. When people are comfortable, they stay in the same place, right? Like, you're comfortable in your all-white neighborhood, and you're comfortable being with other white people. And why would you ever want to live in a black neighborhood or a Mexican neighborhood or an Asian neighborhood? Why would you want to ever leave? your comfortable white life and your comfortable white existence. Yeah, you hear about it on the news, but why would you want to leave? And you know what white people do? They when they hear that they're going to practice integration and bus kids to their school from the inner city, or that they're going to have their kids from their own kids bused to the inner city schools. They have a fit. They lose their minds. And they're like, not my child, not my kid. They don't even want their kids to go to school there, let alone live there. Okay? So that's a real problem. If they did bus the kids there, then the parents' money would follow the child to the new school. The new school would have better funding, and then the schools would be more equal, right? They'd be more equal. There'd be children getting a good education. There'd be children getting a good education everywhere. Would be more equal. But people do not want to share the wealth. They want their kid to get the excellent education. They want their kid to get the best education that any kid ever got. And they do. And other people suffer for it because the money follows the children, and they get less good of an education because the wealth is concentrated. And white people are not giving away money. They're not giving black people jobs doing anything except Walmart and being an associate at Walmart, wearing a blue vest or scrubbing toilets or working at McDonald's. They're not getting jobs. They're not getting jobs in high places. They're not getting jobs in high places. And there's a similar situation for poor whites. There's a situation for people who are obese. The job discrimination follows obese people, regardless of race, everywhere they go. It's happened to me. I've been a flop because there was so much pressure. And it's all justified by a meritocracy, right? That's one of the negatives of certain white liberals. Certain white liberals, they are prejudiced because they have the meritocracy. They discriminate against less intelligent people because part of merit is intelligence. So they discriminate against less intelligent people. And their excuse for discriminating against less intelligent people is, well, you would want the smartest person to do your brain surgery, right? So if you want the smartest person in the world to do your brain surgery, why wouldn't you want the smartest person making your laws? And why wouldn't you want an expert teaching your kids? But that's not the same thing. Brain surgery and laws are not the same thing. But they think it is. They think that people who make laws should be the smartest people in our society, even if they're racist, even if they're white, or even if they're, prejudiced against other races. They don't care. They don't care. They just say, okay, it's a meritocracy. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't genius black people, because there are. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that they say that only the smartest people in America should be making laws, and only the smartest people. That's a form of discrimination. That's a form of discrimination, and poor people and people who are less advantaged in life are discriminated against. They don't care. They don't care. These rich, smart people, they don't care what happens to poor people like us who are less intelligent than they are. They don't care. They're like, okay, you're dumb, and I'm not going to do anything for you because I only like smart people like me. And they discriminate. They discriminate based not on race, but on intelligence. And another thing that happens with a meritocracy is privileging people who are very fit physically, very physically fit. And people who are fat have a moral failing, even though 99% of people cannot lose weight who try. And they're all trying. They're all trying. 99% people cannot lose weight. Does that mean that they're all undisciplined? And that they all have a moral failing? And that this moral failing goes way deep down into their spirits? And they just deserve to be discriminated against, right? It's the meritocracy again. The meritocracy has struck again. And people who are very physically fit and agile and athletic get into colleges based on a sports scholarship. They get to play a sport like football, and everyone else gets messed over. They don't get the special scholarship. So merit is a word that you would think means somebody who's deserving. You'd think it means somebody who's deserving. But instead of meaning someone who's deserving, it means someone who's very talented and gifted biologically. That they have natural gifts that were given to them by their creator. And because they had these natural gifts, they're rewarded. That's what a meritocracy means. So it's something to think about. You didn't know that, right? I've been doing a ton of reading. So read all you can about your role in racism, how you have privileged people and have privileges yourselves that have been undeserved, how you've discriminated against other races just by where you live and where you choose to send your kids to school, and how you decide on a neighborhood. When you're picking a neighborhood to live in, and you pick it because of the school, you're discriminating right there. And you wouldn't think so, would you? You'd think, well, it's my life, it's my kid. But you really are. You're discriminating. And, it can happen even in, like a big city like New York City, which is what I basically read about with New York City. There's neighborhoods right next door to each other. One neighborhood is mostly African American, the other neighborhood is mostly white, and they live right next door to each other. And the white families want their kids to go to an all-white school, or maybe they want a diverse school, but they don't want it too diverse. And then the other school is over 90% or more minority kids. And they do discriminate in New York City. New York City, you wouldn't think because they're so liberal, but they discriminate against kids in New York City. So read all you can. Read all you can about race and racism. Yes, racism is real. Yes, there is a culture of racism and of white elitism. And it's not just conservatives, it's liberals too. Liberals have their meritocracy, and they discriminate against the poor, the less intelligent. They discriminate against fat people. So liberals I've been discriminated against liberals many times. Liberals do discriminate based on things other than race, but liberals are equally guilty of discriminating based on race because they all want all these hipsters and these white liberals want to send their kids to all white schools and they want to live in all white neighborhoods, so they're really discriminating on race anyway. So no one is really, once you start reading about race, no one is really a good guy in this story. Everyone's a little bit racist and everyone comes out looking bad. Spent time in the city for years, rode the buses, saw the segregation, wondered why people couldn't get a fair shake, heard about police harassment of people, heard about all of the things that happen to black people because when they were on the bus, it was a forum, it was an open forum, all right, and they started talking and talking and talking. You heard all of their business when you were on a bus, and I heard it all, and it's real, folks. Racism is real, police brutality is real, happens every day. It's not just George Floyd. I know some people are, like the president's men, all the president's men are trying to say that 99.9% of police are good, and it's just a few bad apples that do this. No, that's a lie. That is saying 99.9%, they pulled that out of their keister. Where did they get that from? It's not true. It's not true. So think about that. Racism is real. Discrimination is real. And what happens when people have no means of providing for themselves? And what happens when they have an urge to be a business person and they can't get a loan? What do? They do the only thing they can do to stay in an apartment and feed their families. The only thing they can do to stay in an apartment and feed their families is to deal drugs, because that's the only thing that's lucrative enough to stay in an apartment. You have to work 3 jobs. You have to work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week to stay in an apartment. I'm serious. You have to work around the clock, and it's everywhere in America. Everywhere in America you go, you have to work 2 to 3 jobs, either 1 full-time job and 1 part-time job, or 3 part-time jobs. And you have to work 12-hour days, 7 days a week, just to stay in an apartment, in your average apartment. That's making just slightly above minimum wage, which is what most people make when they're doing menial labor and didn't go to college and can't do anything else, or when they get right out of college and they can't get a job doing anything other than phone work or data entry. It pays the same as McDonald's. So if you're good on your feet, you work at McDonald's. If you have to sit all day, you get a data entry job. Same thing. Anybody who's gone to high school can get a data entry job, and there's people who can't get anything other than phone work and data entry jobs right out of college. And it's often minorities. So think about why it is that some people sell drugs. It's because they're trying so hard to live. And if you're a professional and you live in an all-white city, you don't understand. I've seen it all. I've seen all of it, and it is true. So I didn't want to give anyone a false impression. I didn't want, by denying systemic racism, I did not mean to give people the impression that there is no racism, because there is racism. I don't want people to think, well, it's just a few individuals. It's 1/10 of 1%, and 99.9% are just fine. That's not the case. That is not the case at all. Racism is everywhere and everyone. But it does start in the home. I'm a firm believer that it starts in the home, that racism starts in the home. I don't know if there's been any in-depth studies to prove that, but I know for a fact because I've seen it start in the home. And I know it starts in the home. Racism starts in the home with parents who, white parents who adopt black children and then abuse them. I've seen that in the home. I've seen parents that don't say a word against racism in a town that's all racist and their kids are all racist. I've seen that too. So it happens, and I've seen it. I've seen it happen. And I know that even liberals who are polite and white are racist because they choose to live separately. They choose to live separate, comfortable lives rather than more dangerous lives. And they're afraid of crime. Yeah, but the reason that there's crime in black neighborhoods is because they're not living there and they're not hiring and they're not contributing. They're not hiring. They're not creating jobs. They're not contributing. And they're not living there, and they're not allowing their kids to go to school there. That's the larger part of the problem right there. That's the larger part of the problem right there is this. It is kind of like separate but equal, right? It's still segregated. It's still segregation that's going on. And it causes huge problems for people. So look at the book list. Get into some good books. And don't think for a second that there isn't racism. Because there is. I don't know if the laws are racist. Because I can't find any books. And I have no... And okay, this one book, You Don't Look Like a Lawyer, explains why the lawyers were so angry. Apparently there's a lot of racism in the legal profession, which I did not know. And it's very hard to get a job in an all-white male law firm. But then once you get a job in the all-male white law firm, they put you through hell every day, and they discriminate against you every day, and there's microaggressions every single day, and there's things you have to do, like maintain your appearance if you're black, that is so demeaning and degrading. That causes a lot of frustration. So that could well be why the two lawyers did what they did. No excuse for Molotov cocktails, but it could be something that drove them to crime, possibly, was all of the discrimination they faced. So that's one possibility, because it's a white male-dominated profession. So check out the book. I can't afford this book. You Don't Look Like a Lawyer. I cannot afford that book. It's hardcover only, and it's $35. I don't have $35. And I don't know what the book is about, and I don't know if it's any good or not. So I probably won't ever read that, but if you get a chance to read it, please do. Trump is one of the richest people in America. He's in the 1% for sure. And he might even be in the 100th of 1%. And he could afford the book. He could afford to be the best educated man on the subject of race that there ever was in this country. And he chooses not to. He chooses not to because he doesn't want to. Think about that. He doesn't want to learn. anything about race. He has no inclination, he has no desire. So he's got the money, but he chooses not to. Just something to think about. So check out the books, and I'll see you next time.